In the cold silence of death row, 72-year-old Rosa Alvarado makes an unusual final request before her execution: to see her dog, Lucky, one last time. Not family, not a priest, just an aging dog who hasn't seen her in 20 years. When prison nurse Emily Carter learns of this strange request, she notices something that everyone else has missed: the complete absence of guilt in Rosa's eyes. What could drive a woman convicted of murdering her husband and a neighbor to only care about saying goodbye to her dog? As Emily begins pulling at loose threads in the case, she uncovers a conspiracy spanning 2 decades, threatening to expose powerful men who would do anything to keep their secrets buried, even if it means silencing Emily permanently. This heart-wrenching story explores how a mother's sacrifice, a faithful dog's memory, and one woman's determination to uncover the truth converge in a race against time that will leave you questioning how many innocent people might be sitting in prison cells right now, their stories untold, their silence protecting someone else. If you're watching this story, make sure to follow our channel for more powerful tales that expose the human condition in its rawest form. Like and comment below to tell us where you're watching from, and share your thoughts on Rosa's extraordinary journey toward justice. The cold dawn light invaded the small cell, creeping through the narrow window like an unwelcome visitor. The metallic ticking of the wall clock marked each second with a funereal echo that seemed to grow louder in the silence. Rosa Alvarado, 72, sat on the edge of her thin mattress, her weathered hands slowly caressing a faded blue collar with the name Lucky engraved on a tarnished tag. Her fingers trembled, not from the pervasive chill of the Georgia State Penitentiary, but from a profound loneliness that seemed to weigh tons upon her slight shoulders. The date of her execution had been set, just 3 days away, yet she didn't shed a single tear. She just stared at the floor, her eyes reflecting decades of unspoken stories. Outside her cell, the firm footsteps of correctional officers echoed down the empty corridor. Their boots created a rhythmic percussion against the concrete floor, a sound most inmates had learned to fear. They called her name with procedural voices, flat and emotionless. Rosa didn't respond, not because she was ignoring them, but because she couldn't hear them properly. Born partially deaf, she had learned throughout her long life that silence could protect you, but it could also kill you. There was something in her eyes that suggested she had never told anyone the complete truth. Officer Jenkins, a man with 23 years of service and a face permanently creased with skepticism, unlocked her cell door. He'd seen hundreds of death row inmates in his career, the violent ones, the remorseful ones, the ones who proclaimed their innocence until their final breath. But Rosa was different. She'd never protested, never appealed, never asked for anything in all the years she'd been incarcerated. Until now. "Mrs. Alvarado," he said loudly, exaggerating his mouth movements so she could read his lips. "The warden wants to know if you have any final requests." "Anything special for your last meal?" Rosa slowly raised her eyes, deep brown eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom and sorrow of centuries. With a voice hoarse and almost childlike, she whispered, "I want to see my dog." Officer Jenkins swallowed hard. Lucky, the dog who had survived the fire that had condemned her, now lived in a municipal shelter on the outskirts of Savannah. The request touched something in him he thought had calcified years ago, but it also awakened a suffocating mystery. Why would this woman, convicted of killing 2 men in a deliberately set house fire, only want to see a dog before she died? He shifted uncomfortably. I'll see what I can do, ma'am." Rosa nodded almost imperceptibly and returned her gaze to the collar in her hands, her thumb tracing the letters of Lucky's name over and over, as if it were a rosary, and she was praying for absolution. On the other side of the prison, Emily Carter, 29, a prison nurse with auburn hair perpetually tied in a messy bun, observed everything through the infirmary window. Her green eyes reflected a divided soul, torn between empathy and unease. She'd been working at the facility for only 8 months, but something about Rosa had caught her attention from the beginning. It wasn't just that Rosa was the oldest woman on death row in Georgia's history. It wasn't even the brutal nature of her alleged crime. It was the absence of guilt in her gaze. Emily had seen plenty of murderers in her short career. Some boasted, some wept, some dissociated entirely from their crimes, but all carried the invisible weight of what they'd done, whether they admitted it or not. Rosa's eyes were different. They held sorrow, resignation, fear even, but not guilt. and that observation would become the thread that would unravel the entire fabric of truth. As Emily finished organizing the medication for the evening rounds, she overheard two officers discussing Rosa's request. "Can you believe it? All she wants is to see some mangy mutt," one said, shaking his head. "Probably the only living thing that ever loved her," the other replied with a smirk. Emily felt a flash of anger rise in her chest. She had reviewed Rosa's medical charts numerous times. The woman had severe hearing impairment, arthritis that twisted her fingers into painful knots, and recurring nightmares that left her screaming in the early hours. Yet she never complained, never asked for extra pain medication, just endured in silence. Later that evening, as Emily delivered Rosa's medication, she noticed the old woman's hands were shaking more than usual. A single tear had finally escaped, tracing a path down her wrinkled cheek. "Are you in pain, Mrs. Alvarado?" Emily asked, making sure Rosa could see her face clearly. Rosa shook her head. Then, with trembling hands, she reached under her pillow and pulled out a yellowed photograph. It showed a much younger Rosa standing beside Lucky as a puppy. Behind them was a modest house with a wraparound porch. She pointed at the dog in the picture, then at her heart. "He knew," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "Lucky knew what happened that night. Dogs always know." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean? What did Lucky know?" But Rosa's momentary openness vanished as quickly as it had appeared. She carefully tucked the photograph back under her pillow and closed her eyes, signaling that the conversation was over. As Emily left the cell, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just glimpsed the edge of a truth so terrible it had remained buried for decades. A truth that would soon die with Rosa Alvarado, unless someone uncovered it in the next 72 hours. And in that moment, standing in the sterile corridor of Georgia State Penitentiary, Emily made a decision that would change both their lives forever. She would find Lucky. She would discover what really happened on the night of the fire. And maybe, just maybe, she could bring peace to an old woman before her appointment with death. What Emily couldn't possibly know was that her search for the truth would unearth secrets that powerful men had killed to protect. Secrets that had been hidden behind Rosa's silence for over 20 years. Secrets that would shake the foundations of justice in Savannah, Georgia, and leave no one, not even Emily herself, untouched by their terrible revelation. Emily Carter's apartment was a testament to a life put on pause. Cardboard boxes still sat unopened in corners marked with labels like Mom's Kitchen and photo albums in neat, deliberate handwriting. She hadn't found the strength to unpack them in the 11 months since her mother's unexpected death from an aneurysm. The grief had calcified into something hard and permanent that she carried everywhere, like a stone in her pocket. Sleep eluded her that night. Rosa Alvarado's weathered face and that cryptic whisper, "Lucky knew what happened," played on repeat in her mind. At 2:37 a.m., Emily gave up on sleep altogether. She padded to her small kitchen, made a cup of chamomile tea her mother would have recommended, and opened her laptop. The search results for Rosa Alvarado Fire, Savannah, Georgia, yielded several archived newspaper articles from 2003. The headlines were sensationalist. Elderly woman convicted in double homicide fire. Immigrant grandmother faces death penalty in arson case. Domestic dispute ends in flames. 2 dead. Emily clicked through each one, her brow furrowing deeper with each paragraph. The official story was straightforward. Rosa Alvarado, then 50, had deliberately set fire to her home after an argument with her husband Miguel. The fire had killed Miguel and a neighbor, Clive Donovan, who had apparently rushed in to help. Prosecutors claimed Rosa had used accelerant to ensure the fire spread quickly, blocking exits. The evidence seemed damning. Rosa was found outside the burning house, unharmed except for minor smoke inhalation, while her husband and neighbor perished inside. But something about the timeline didn't add up. According to testimony, Rosa had been seen walking Lucky 3 blocks away just 15 minutes before the fire started. How could she have returned, started the fire, and escaped so quickly? "There's something wrong here," Emily murmured to the empty room, her mother's voice in her head replying as it often did. "Trust your instincts, Emmy. They're rarely wrong." The next morning, Emily arrived at work earlier than usual. The penitentiary was quietest at dawn, before the administrative staff arrived and the day shift took over. She headed straight to the medical records room. As a nurse, she had access, but what she was planning stretched the boundaries of her authorization. Rosa's medical file was thicker than most. 20 years of incarceration generated a lot of paperwork. Emily flipped through routine checkups, medications prescribed for arthritis, and hearing assessments. Then she found it. A complete physical examination from when Rosa was first processed into the prison system. The report documented multiple old injuries, healed fractures in 3 fingers of her right hand, 2 previously broken ribs, and the most telling detail, a pattern of linear burn scars on her upper arms and back. The examining doctor had noted, scars consistent with cigarette burns in various stages of healing. Patient refused to discuss origins. Emily's stomach clenched. These weren't injuries from the fire that killed Miguel and Clive. They were older, systematic, signs of prolonged abuse. She continued searching and found a yellowed photograph between the pages, the same one Rosa had shown her. But now Emily could see the full image. Rosa stood with Lucky beside a white clapboard house with fading blue shutters. Behind them stood a stern-looking man with a military posture who must be Miguel, and beside him, a thin teenage boy with Rosa's eyes. On the back, written in shaky handwriting, "Quien calla, sobrevive." Who remains silent, survives. "What were you silent about, Rosa?" Emily whispered. A noise at the door startled her. Director Walters, a man whose immaculate suits and political ambitions seemed at odds with the grim reality of prison administration, stood watching her. "Nurse Carter, you're in early today." Emily closed the file casually, sliding the photograph into her pocket with practiced smoothness. "Just reviewing some patient histories before rounds." Walters nodded, his expression unreadable. "I heard Mrs. Alvarado made an unusual last request. Something about her dog." "Yes, she did," Emily replied carefully. "I think it would be a humane gesture to grant it." Walters adjusted his crimson tie, the same shade as the Tough on Crime campaign posters Emily had seen around town with his face on them. "There will be no exceptions for the Alvarado execution. Protocol is protocol. That dog can only be brought in if someone officially takes responsibility for it." The subtext was clear. If Emily wanted to help Rosa, she'd have to put herself on the line. "What would that entail exactly?" she asked, her heart racing. "Paperwork, liability, proving the animal isn't dangerous." He shrugged. "More trouble than it's worth for a woman who'll be dead in 2 days." After he left, Emily sat motionless, the weight of Director Walters' callousness settling over her. Her fingers found the photograph in her pocket, tracing its worn edges. That evening, after her shift ended, Emily made a decision. She would return to the records room after hours and look deeper. This time she'd focus not on medical files, but on the legal documents related to Rosa's case. The prison was eerily quiet when she slipped back in using her medical access card. The fluorescent lights flickered as she carefully opened Rosa's legal file. Between statements and court transcripts, Emily found a collection of evidence photographs. Most showed the burned remains of the house, but one made her breath catch, an overhead shot of the bedroom where Miguel's body was found. The burn pattern didn't spread outward from a single point as would be expected if Rosa had set the fire. Instead, it showed 2 distinct origins on opposite sides of the room. As she was about to leave, a loose paper fluttered to the floor, a visitor log showing that someone had visited Rosa just once during her 20 years of incarceration. The name was illegible, but the visit had occurred exactly 1 year after her imprisonment. Emily carefully replaced the files and left, her mind racing with questions. Who had visited Rosa? What did the strange burn pattern mean? And most importantly, what was the connection to Lucky, the only witness who couldn't speak? As she stepped into the parking lot, Emily didn't notice the sedan with tinted windows idling across the street, or the man inside watching her through binoculars, his face obscured by shadows and the glow of a cigarette. The digital clock on Emily's dashboard blinked 3:47 a.m. as she navigated her blue Honda Civic through the sleeping streets of Savannah. The rhythmic swish of windshield wipers battled against an unexpected summer rain, their cadence matching her racing heartbeat. She'd left directly after her overnight shift, the address from Rosa's file burning in her mind like a fever. 1423 Magnolia Avenue, a once respectable neighborhood on the outskirts of town that had fallen into disrepair over the decades. Sleep could wait. Truth couldn't. As Emily turned onto Magnolia Avenue, the houses grew farther apart, with overgrown yards and peeling paint suggesting economic struggles that predated the fire at the Alvarado home. She slowed the car, squinting through the rain-streaked windshield at faded house numbers until she found it. Or rather, what remained of it. The Alvarado house stood like a blackened skeleton against the lightening pre-dawn sky. 20 years of Georgia weather had done little to erase the devastation. The roof had partially collapsed and charred beams jutted upward like accusatory fingers. A rusted chain-link fence surrounded the property, with a faded "no trespassing" sign hanging askew on the gate. Emily parked across the street, her headlights briefly illuminating the property before she killed the engine. The silence that followed felt oppressive, broken only by raindrops pattering on the car roof. She reached into her glove compartment for a flashlight and took a deep breath before stepping out into the drizzle. The gate's hinges groaned in protest as she pushed it open, the sound unnervingly loud in the silent neighborhood. The overgrown front yard was a tangle of weeds and debris, with occasional glimpses of what might once have been a garden. A concrete bird bath tipped on its side, the rusted remains of a garden gnome, wild roses growing in chaotic abandon where they had once been carefully tended. The smell hit her immediately, not just the expected mustiness of abandonment, but a lingering, acrid scent of old fire that seemed to have permeated the very soil. 2 decades later, and it still smelled of destruction, of endings, of secrets. "What happened here, Rosa?" Emily whispered as if the charred walls might answer. She approached the house cautiously, testing each step on the rotting porch boards. The front door hung partially open, its lower half burned away entirely. Emily swept her flashlight beam across the entryway, revealing a scene frozen in time. The skeletal remains of furniture, wallpaper peeled away in long, mournful strips, and a thick layer of dust and debris covering everything. Moving deeper into the house, Emily found herself in what must have been the living room. Water damage from years of rain through the compromised roof had compounded the fire's destruction. Yet amid the chaos, she noticed something odd. Patches of floor where the burn patterns were distinctly different. Not lighter or less damaged, but charred in a way that suggested a different type of fire altogether. Emily crouched down, examining the first unusual burn pattern. It was almost perfectly circular, with damage radiating outward. About 8 feet away, a second similar pattern marked the floor. She remembered the crime scene photo she'd seen in the file. 2 distinct points of origin. Not the chaotic spread of an accidental fire, or even one deliberately set in anger. This was methodical, planned. 2 fires, she murmured, started separately. Her flashlight beam caught something metallic beneath a fallen beam. Carefully, Emily pushed aside the debris and uncovered a small metal container, about the size of a tuna can but flatter. She pried it open to find the remains of what looked like candle wax, but the scent that wafted up was unmistakable. Gasoline. A staged fire. A deliberate frame job. The realization sent a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with the damp morning air. If Rosa hadn't set the fire, who had? And why had she accepted the blame? Emily's thoughts were interrupted by the distinct crunch of tires on the gravel road outside. She quickly pocketed the metal container and moved to a window, carefully peering out through a gap in the burned curtains. A battered pickup truck had parked beside her Civic. Its headlights remained on, obscuring the driver's face, but she could make out the silhouette of a man sitting motionless behind the wheel, watching, waiting. Emily's pulse quickened. She needed to leave, but the front door would put her directly in the truck driver's line of sight. Moving as quietly as possible, she made her way toward the back of the house, navigating through the kitchen where cabinet doors hung from single hinges like broken jaws. The back door opened onto what had once been a small yard, now wild and overgrown. A rusted swing set listed to one side, its chains long since snapped. Near the back fence, Emily noticed a small mound with a weather-beaten piece of wood sticking out of the ground. Moving closer, she realized it was a grave marker, hand-carved with a single word. "Buddy." "Not lucky," Emily whispered. "Another dog?" The sound of a car door slamming shut at the front of the house jolted her into motion. She quickly scaled the back fence, dropping into the alley beyond, and circled the block at a run, her shoes squelching in the mud, her breath coming in panicked gasps. When she rounded the corner onto Magnolia Avenue, the pickup truck was still there, but empty. The driver must have gone into the house. Emily slid into her car, hands shaking as she jammed the key into the ignition. As she pulled away, her rearview mirror caught the image of a man standing in the doorway of the Alvarado house, a tall figure with broad shoulders and gray hair, watching her retreat with unnerving stillness. She drove for 20 minutes before her heart stopped racing, pulling into an empty church parking lot to examine her find. The metal container was a specialty candle tin, the kind sold in tourist shops along the Savannah riverfront, but it had been repurposed, filled with a mixture of wax and accelerant, a timed fire starter. Someone could light the candle and the fire would appear to start naturally once the flame reached the accelerant-soaked wax below. On the bottom of the tin, barely visible beneath a layer of soot, was a mark that made Emily's blood run cold, the stamped insignia of the Savannah Fire Department. She stared at it in disbelief. Who would have access to fire department equipment? Who would know how to stage a fire to look accidental, then like arson? And who would have the authority to manipulate an investigation? As she placed the tin carefully in her glove compartment, a realization struck her. She was no longer just trying to grant an old woman's last wish. She had stumbled onto something much darker, a conspiracy that had sent Rosa Alvarado to death row while the real killer remained free. And with Rosa's execution less than 36 hours away, Emily was now the only person who could uncover the truth. Dawn was breaking over Savannah as Emily stumbled into her apartment, exhaustion and adrenaline battling for dominance in her body. She hadn't slept in nearly 30 hours and her scrub still smelled faintly of hospital antiseptic mixed with the acrid scent of the burned house. She placed the metal candle tin on her kitchen counter, staring at the fire department insignia as if it might speak to her. The shower's hot water did little to wash away the feeling of being watched, of being hunted. Who was that man at the Alvarado house? And why would someone monitor an abandoned property after 20 years? As she toweled her hair dry, Emily's phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your mailbox. Be careful who you trust." Heart pounding, she peered through her apartment window. The street below was empty in the early morning light. Residents of her modest apartment complex still asleep or already gone to work. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed her keys and ventured downstairs to the bank of mailboxes in the lobby. Her mailbox, untouched for days amid her chaotic work schedule, contained only a small manila envelope with no return address or postmark. It had been hand-delivered. Back in her apartment, Emily locked the door and slid the security chain into place before carefully opening the envelope. Inside were 2 photocopied pages, clearly torn from an official document. The heading read, "Savannah Police Department, Preliminary Arson Investigation," with a date stamp from the day after the Alvarado fire. The pages contained details that contradicted everything in Rosa's official case file. The investigator, a detective James Callahan, had noted suspicious burn patterns indicating multiple points of origin and evidence of accelerant use inconsistent with accidental ignition. Most damning was his conclusion. Victim positioning and post-mortem lividity suggest Miguel Alvarado was deceased prior to fire initiation. Recommend full homicide investigation, but that investigation had never happened. Instead, Rosa had been arrested, tried, and convicted of arson and double homicide based on a revised report, claiming she had set a single fire after an argument with her husband. Emily's hands trembled as she processed the implications. Someone had manipulated the investigation, buried Detective Callahan's findings, and replaced them with a fabricated narrative that sent Rosa to death row. At the bottom of the second page was a handwritten note. The truth died with Callahan's fear. The cryptic message echoed in Emily's mind. What had frightened the detective into silence? And who had sent her these pages now, after all these years? She grabbed her laptop and searched for James Callahan. The first result was an obituary from 2005, just 2 years after the Alvarado case. Detective James Callahan, 52, died of an apparent heart attack in his Savannah home. The photo showed a man with kind eyes and a serious expression, wearing his police uniform with pride. Too young for a natural heart attack. Too convenient a timing. Emily's phone chimed again. Another text from the unknown number. Bonaventure Cemetery, Section E, noon today. The historic cemetery was a tourist attraction by day, its moss-draped oaks and elaborate monuments drawing visitors from across the country. But it was also where Detective Callahan had been buried, according to his obituary. Someone wanted to meet her there. Someone who knew what had really happened to the Alvarados. With Rosa's execution scheduled for the next morning, Emily had no choice but to go. The cemetery was quiet at midday, most tourists deterred by the unusually hot October sun that beat down on the weathered headstones. Emily wandered through Section E, scanning the names until she found Callahan's modest granite marker. She sat on a nearby bench, the wrought iron hot against her legs, and waited. "You're braver than I expected," came a gravelly voice from behind her. Emily turned to see an elderly man emerging from behind a family mausoleum. His lined face spoke of decades in the Georgia sun, and he walked with a pronounced limp. He sat beside her, keeping his eyes fixed on Callahan's grave. "I'm retired Officer Wilson Parker," he said quietly. "I worked the Alvarado case with Jim Callahan." "You sent me the files," Emily said. It wasn't a question. Parker nodded. "I've kept those pages hidden for 20 years. Kept my mouth shut too, God forgive me." His voice cracked with emotion. "When I heard they finally set a date for Rosa's execution, I knew I couldn't take the truth to my grave too." "What really happened that night?" Emily asked, her heart racing. Parker sighed deeply. "The official story was bullshit from the start. Jim knew it. I knew it. The fire chief knew it too, but he was persuaded to revise his report." "Persuaded by whom?" "Clive Donovan." Parker practically spat the name. "The other victim in the fire. He wasn't just any neighbor. He was a decorated fire captain with the Savannah FD and the mayor's brother-in-law. Untouchable." Emily felt a chill despite the heat. And the real story? Miguel Alvarado was beating his wife for years. Rosa kept quiet about it. Immigrants from her background often do. But that night was different. Their son Roberto had come home from college and confronted his father about the abuse. Things got ugly. Parker paused, his eyes distant with painful memories. Clive Donovan had been Miguel's drinking buddy for years. He was there that night. When Roberto tried to defend his mother, both men attacked him. The kid fought back, killed Miguel in self-defense when the man came at him with a knife. And Donovan? Set the fire to cover it up. Made it look like arson so he could pin it on Rosa. He knew exactly how to manipulate the evidence. He'd been with the fire department for 20 years. But why would Rosa take the blame? Emily asked. For her son, Parker said simply. Roberto fled that night, probably terrified of what would happen to him as an immigrant kid who'd killed a white man, even in self-defense. Rosa confessed to protect him. Donovan threatened to hunt Roberto down if she told the truth. And the dog? Lucky? The dog saw everything. Donovan wanted it destroyed, claimed it was aggressive after the fire, but one of the responding officers couldn't do it. Took the dog to a shelter instead. Emily's mind raced. Where is Roberto now? I don't know. He disappeared that night, maybe left the country, maybe Donovan found him anyway. Parker stood with difficulty. But there's one person who might know. Who? Father Thomas at St. Patrick's Church. Rosa was a devout parishioner before the fire. If Roberto ever tried to contact his mother, it might have been through him. Emily stood too, her exhaustion forgotten. The man who's been watching the Alvarado house, tall gray hair, drives a pickup. Is that Donovan? Parker's face paled. You've seen him. Stay away from him, nurse. Donovan retired as a fire chief, but he's still got friends in high places. He's the reason Callahan died of a heart attack after asking too many questions. Rosa's execution is tomorrow morning, Emily said urgently. I need proof. Something concrete to take to the authorities. Proof died in that fire, Parker said grimly. All you have is the word of a disgraced ex-cop who was too cowardly to speak up when it mattered. He pressed a small key into her hand. This opens a storage locker at Savannah Self-Storage on Montgomery Street. Unit 217. Jim kept his personal case notes there. Maybe there's something that can help. As Parker walked away, Emily called after him. Why now? After 20 years of silence? He stopped but didn't turn around. Because I woke up yesterday and realized I couldn't face Jim in the afterlife if I let another innocent person die. His shoulders slumped. Some silence is way too much to carry to the grave. Emily watched him disappear among the tombstones, the key clutched tightly in her palm. She had less than 24 hours to uncover 2 decades of buried truth, and Rosa's life depended on it. The Savannah self-storage facility loomed before Emily like a fortress of corrugated metal, its rows of orange doors gleaming under the harsh afternoon sun. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pulled into the nearly empty parking lot, the key from Officer Parker heavy in her pocket. The air conditioning in her car sputtered weakly against the October heat as she rehearsed what she would say to the attendant. She needn't have worried. The office was empty except for a disinterested college-age clerk who barely looked up from his textbook when she entered. I need to access Unit 217, Emily said, sliding the key across the counter. The young man glanced at it, then at his computer screen. That unit's been paid up through 2027. Automatic payments. He pushed a clipboard toward her. Sign here and I'll buzz you through. 20 years of automatic payments. Detective Callahan had wanted to ensure his evidence survived him. The thought sent a chill down Emily's spine despite the oppressive heat. Unit 217 was located in the back corner of the facility, partially hidden in shadows. The padlock was stiff from disuse, and Emily had to use both hands to turn the key. When the door finally rolled upward with a metallic groan, the musty scent of old paper and forgotten secrets wafted out. Unlike the cluttered storage units shown on reality TV, this one contained only a single metal filing cabinet and a cardboard box sealed with yellowed packing tape. Both were covered in a thick layer of dust, undisturbed for years. Emily pulled the chain to illuminate the single bare bulb overhead, then dragged the box into the light. Alvarado case, personal notes, was written on the side in faded marker. She broke the seal, coughing as dust particles danced in the beam of light. Inside were meticulously organized folders, each labeled with dates and subject matters. Detective Callahan had been thorough, too thorough for his own good, apparently. Emily began sifting through them, her nursing training helping her to catalog and prioritize the information quickly. Photographs of the fire scene showed exactly what Parker had described. Multiple points of origin inconsistent with accidental ignition. Close-ups of Miguel Alvarado's body revealed bruising patterns that suggested he had been in a physical altercation before the fire. Most tellingly, there were blood spatter patterns documented on a kitchen wall that had later been burned, blood that the official report never mentioned. Another folder contained background information on Clive Donovan. News clippings highlighted his decorated career with the Savannah Fire Department, his community service awards, his connections to local politics through his sister's marriage to then-Mayor Thompson. One photo showed him receiving a Medal of Valor, his proud smile revealing a distinctive gap between his front teeth, the same gap Emily had glimpsed in the man watching her at the Alvarado house. But it was the final folder that made Emily's heart pound. Labeled simply Roberto, it contained information about Rosa and Miguel's son. A school photo showed a serious young man with Rosa's gentle eyes and determined chin. Honor roll certificates, college acceptance letters, and a partial scholarship to Georgia State University painted a picture of a promising future cut short by tragedy. The last document in the folder was a handwritten statement dated 3 days after the fire. Roberto had come to Callahan in secret, confessing to killing his father in self-defense after Miguel had attacked both him and Rosa in a drunken rage. He described how Donovan, his father's friend who had been present, had threatened to make sure Roberto disappeared unless Rosa took the blame. Donovan had the connections to make it happen, and Rosa, terrified for her son's life, had agreed to confess. Tears blurred Emily's vision as she read Roberto's account of fleeing that night, of the guilt that consumed him knowing his mother was sacrificing herself. The statement ended with a desperate plea. "Please help my mother. She's innocent. I'll testify to everything." But Roberto had never testified, and Callahan's investigation had been buried. A final note in Callahan's handwriting read, "Roberto disappeared after this statement." His roommate reported him missing, but the case was closed within 48 hours. Sources in Atlanta PD suggest pressure from Savannah officials. No body ever found. Emily sat back on her heels, the implications washing over her. Had Roberto been silenced permanently, or had he gone into hiding, fearing for his life? She turned to the filing cabinet, which was unlocked. Inside were more comprehensive records, not just of the Alvarado case, but others where Callahan had suspected corruption or cover-ups. The man had been building a case against powerful figures in Savannah for years. In the very back of the bottom drawer, Emily found a small fireproof box with a simple combination lock. After trying several combinations, she realized the numbers matched the date of the Alvarado fire. Inside was a mini cassette tape labeled Rosa Interview and a handwritten note. "If anything happens to me, take this to FBI agent Marquez in Atlanta. Only Marquez." Emily stared at the tape. In the age of smartphones and digital files, she had no way to play it. But she knew exactly who might have a player. The technophobic courthouse clerk who still kept her case files on obsolete media. As she carefully packed the most crucial evidence, a shadow fell across the storage unit entrance. Emily froze, her back to the door. "Finding anything interesting, nurse?" The voice was smooth, controlled, but with an underlying menace that made the hair on Emily's arm stand up. She turned slowly to face Clive Donovan. In person, he was taller than she had imagined, his broad shoulders still powerful despite his age. The gap between his front teeth was visible as he smiled, a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. "Just some old family mementos," Emily lied, slipping the tape into her pocket. "I inherited the unit from my uncle." Donovan stepped into the unit, his presence filling the small space. "Funny coincidence. I knew a detective who kept a unit in this very facility. Similar number 2. Savannah's a small town," Emily said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "If you'll excuse me, I'm running late for work." Donovan made no move to let her pass. "You've been asking a lot of questions about Rosa Alvarado. Visiting her house, talking to retired cops." His smile faded. "Some matters are better left in the past, especially when the courts have already decided them. Like I said, I'm late," Emily repeated, clutching her bag of evidence tightly. Donovan's hand shot out, gripping her arm with surprising strength. "Whatever you think you know, you don't. Rosa Alvarado is guilty. She confessed. End of story." Emily yanked her arm free. "Then you have nothing to worry about, do you?" Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. 20 years ago, a young detective couldn't leave well enough alone either. Had a mysterious heart attack at 52. Healthy guy otherwise. The threat hung in the air between them. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Donovan?" Emily asked, her fear transforming into anger. "Just sharing a cautionary tale." He stepped aside, clearing her path to the door. "Rosa's execution is tomorrow. After that, none of this will matter anymore. Go home. Forget what you think you know." Emily walked past him, her heart hammering in her chest. "The thing about truth, Mr. Donovan," she said at the doorway, unable to resist, "is that it doesn't stop being true just because someone dies." His chuckle followed her as she hurried toward her car. "You really think anyone's going to believe you over me? I built half the firehouses in this county. My brother-in-law is a federal judge now." Emily didn't respond, but as she drove away, she checked her rearview mirror repeatedly, watching Donovan's pickup follow at a measured distance. Time was running out, and now she knew for certain there was more than one life at stake. The Gothic spires of St. Patrick's Cathedral pierced the fading afternoon sky as Emily pulled into the nearly empty parking lot, her tires crunching on the gravel. Donovan's truck had disappeared a few blocks back, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The cassette tape from Callahan's lockbox felt like it was burning a hole in her pocket, a tiny rectangle of plastic that might hold the key to Rosa's freedom. But first, she needed to find Father Thomas. The massive wooden doors of the cathedral groaned as Emily pushed them open. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of incense and old wood. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting multicolored patterns across the worn pews. The sanctuary was empty except for an elderly woman lighting candles at the Virgin Mary statue. "Excuse me?" Emily approached her softly. "Do you know where I might find Father Thomas?" The woman crossed herself before turning. "Father Thomas is in the garden, through that door." She pointed to a small side entrance. "But he doesn't see many visitors these days. His mind wanders." Emily thanked her and followed the directions, stepping out into a small, immaculately maintained garden. Roses and hydrangeas bloomed alongside herbs and vegetables, creating a peaceful oasis in the midst of the city. On a stone bench sat an elderly priest, his thin white hair stirring in the breeze as he fed crumbs to a gathering of sparrows. "Father Thomas?" Emily approached cautiously. The old man looked up, his rheumy eyes struggling to focus. "Yes, my child? My name is Emily Carter. I'm a nurse at Georgia State Penitentiary." She sat beside him on the bench. "I need to ask you about Rosa Alvarado." A shadow passed across Father Thomas's face. "Rosa," he repeated, his voice suddenly clearer. "It's been many years since I've heard that name spoken aloud." The birds scattered as he shifted to face her fully. "Why do you ask about her now?" "She's scheduled to be executed tomorrow morning," Emily said gently. The priest closed his eyes, pain etching deeper lines into his already weathered face. "God forgive us all." He murmured a quick prayer in Spanish, crossing himself. "What do you want to know?" "I believe she's innocent, Father. I have evidence suggesting she took the blame to protect her son Roberto after he killed Miguel in self-defense." Emily leaned closer. "The other man who died in the fire, Clive Donovan, was there that night. He set the fire to cover it up and threatened Roberto's life to force Rosa's confession." Father Thomas's hands trembled as he clutched his rosary beads. "You know more than most," he acknowledged. "But not all. Did Roberto contact you after he fled?" Emily asked. "Come," the priest said, rising with effort. "Not here." He led her through a side door into the church office, a cramped space filled with filing cabinets and religious texts. After ensuring they were alone, he unlocked a drawer in his desk and removed a worn leather journal. "I've been a priest in this parish for 48 years, he said, his fingers tracing the cover of the journal. "I've heard thousands of confessions, kept countless secrets, but few have weighed on me like Rosa's." He opened the journal to a page marked with a faded red ribbon. Rosa was devoted to her son. When Miguel began to drink heavily after losing his job at the docks, she endured his abuse silently. But when he started to turn his rage toward Roberto, Father Thomas shook his head. She was trapped, an undocumented woman with limited English, no money, no resources. "What happened the night of the fire?" Emily pressed. Roberto had come home from college for the weekend. He found Miguel beating Rosa with a belt. When he intervened, Miguel attacked him with a kitchen knife. In the struggle, Roberto pushed him away. Miguel fell, hit his head on the counter. He died instantly. And Donovan? He was Miguel's supervisor at the docks before the layoffs. They'd been drinking together earlier. He came by to check on Miguel and found chaos. Roberto panicking. Rosa trying to help her son. A dead man on the kitchen floor. Father Thomas's voice grew quieter. Donovan saw opportunity. He told them he could fix everything, make it look like an accident. But Rosa needed to confess to starting the fire if questions were raised. "But why kill Donovan too?" Emily asked, confused. Father Thomas looked surprised. "Kill him? Clive Donovan didn't die in that fire." Emily felt the blood drain from her face. "But the case file, the news reports, they all said 2 men died. Miguel and a neighbor named Clive Donovan." The priest shook his head slowly. "No, my child. The second body was identified as Clive, but it wasn't him. It was another man, a homeless veteran who had been sleeping on their porch sometimes. Miguel had befriended him. Then who has been threatening me? Who followed me to the storage unit today?" Father Thomas's expression darkened. "Clive Donovan, very much alive. He used the fire to disappear, to escape gambling debts and a pending investigation into missing funds at the fire department. The body was burned beyond recognition. Dental records should have proven it wasn't him. But as fire chief, Donovan had access to records. He could have altered them." Emily's mind raced. So the real Clive Donovan has been living under a new identity for 20 years, while Rosa took the blame for murders she didn't commit? "He visits Savannah occasionally," Father Thomas confirmed. "I've seen him myself watching the church from his truck during Spanish-language masses, checking if Roberto might return." "And did he return?" Emily held her breath. Father Thomas hesitated. "Roberto contacted me once about a year after he fled. He was in Arizona working under a different name. He wanted to know if his mother was okay." The priest's eyes filled with tears. "I told him she had accepted her fate, that she wanted him to live a good life. He sent letters for her through me every month for years." "Letters?" Emily's pulse quickened. "Do you still have them?" He nodded. "Rosa asked me to keep them safe. She was afraid to have them at the prison, afraid Donovan might have connections inside who would report back to him." He removed a bundle of envelopes tied with twine from the same drawer. "When the execution date was finally set, I wrote to Roberto at the last address I had. My letter came back unopened." Emily carefully took the bundle, her hands trembling with the weight of its importance. "These prove Roberto was alive after the fire, that he was the one who killed Miguel in self-defense, not Rosa. But will they be enough to stop tomorrow's execution?" Father Thomas asked, his voice heavy with doubt. "Not alone," Emily admitted. "But combined with Detective Callahan's evidence, Rosa's testimony on this tape, if I can find a way to play it, and your statement." Father Thomas straightened his stooped shoulders. "I have kept silent too long, afraid of breaking the sanctity of confession. But there comes a time when silence becomes complicity in injustice." He took a deep breath. "I will testify to what I know." As they prepared to leave, Emily's phone rang. The prison's number flashed on the screen. "Ms. Carter," came Director Walters's clipped voice. "I understand you've been asking about bringing the Alvarado woman's dog to the execution." Emily had almost forgotten about Lucky and her frantic search for evidence. "Yes, it's her last request. We've made an exception. The dog has been retrieved from the shelter and will be permitted a brief visit tomorrow at 6 a.m., 1 hour before the scheduled procedure." His tone softened slightly. "The animal is quite old. It seemed humane." After ending the call, Emily turned to Father Thomas. "They're allowing Lucky to see Rosa tomorrow morning. I need to get this evidence to a judge tonight. Someone who can issue a stay of execution." The priest's expression grew troubled. "Be careful. Judge Morrison would be sympathetic to Rosa's case, but his courthouse closes at 5. It's nearly 4:30 now." Emily gathered the letters and Callahan's evidence. "I'll make it. And Father, thank you." As she hurried to her car, Emily didn't notice the pickup truck parked across the street, or the fact that her back tire had been slashed just enough to ensure a slow leak. She was too focused on the race against time, and against a man who had managed to live as a ghost for 20 years, while an innocent woman awaited death. The Savannah courthouse gleamed like a white marble temple in the late afternoon sun, its ionic columns casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. Emily's car sputtered and jerked as she pulled into the parking lot, the steering suddenly becoming difficult to control. A glance at the dashboard showed the tire pressure warning illuminated in angry red. "Not now," she muttered, pulling into a space and grabbing her bag of evidence. She'd deal with the tire after securing the stay of execution. The courthouse steps seemed endless as she raced up them, the bundle of Roberto's letters and Callahan's files clutched against her chest. The massive oak doors were still open, but inside, the building had the quiet, empty feeling of a government office preparing to close for the day. The directory indicated Judge Morrison's chambers were on the 3rd floor. Emily took the stairs, unwilling to wait for the ancient elevator, her footsteps echoing in the marble stairwell. At the top, breathless, she found a deserted corridor lined with heavy wooden doors. Judge Morrison's nameplate was visible at the far end. "Can I help you?" A security guard appeared from a side hallway, his expression suspicious. "I need to see Judge Morrison immediately," Emily said, trying to sound professional despite her disheveled appearance. "It's an emergency motion for a stay of execution." The guard checked his watch. "Court closed at 4. Judge Morrison left early for a fundraising dinner." Emily's heart sank. This can't wait until morning. A woman's life depends on it. "Rosa Alvarado is scheduled for execution at 7 a.m. Something flickered in the guard's eyes. Recognition, perhaps even sympathy. The Alvarado case? That's been going through appeals for years. What's new now? Emily made a split-second decision to trust him. Evidence of her innocence. Evidence that was suppressed 20 years ago by a man who's still alive. A man who was supposed to have died in that fire. The guard studied her for a long moment. "Judge Morrison is at the Telfair Museum Gala. Black tie event, lots of important people." He lowered his voice. "My sister works catering there. If you go to the service entrance and ask for Lucille, tell her Earl sent you. She might help you get to the judge." "Thank you," Emily whispered, her gratitude overwhelming. Racing back to her car, she found the tire completely flat, the metal rim resting on the pavement. It wasn't a coincidence. Someone, Donovan, had sabotaged her vehicle. Emily looked around frantically. No taxis in sight, and rideshare would take precious minutes to arrive. The Telfair Museum was 15 blocks away, too far to run with any dignity left to approach a judge. Then she spotted it. A motorcycle with a courier service logo parked near the courthouse steps. Its rider just returning to it. "Excuse me?" Emily called, running toward the young man. "I'll pay you $200 to take me to the Telfair Museum right now. It's a matter of life and death." The courier, a college-aged kid with a nose ring, looked skeptical but intrigued. "Lady, my shift just ended." $300, Emily countered, pulling cash from her wallet, nearly everything she had. 2 minutes later, Emily was clinging to the back of the motorcycle as it weaved through Savannah's historic district, her evidence bag secured between them. The wind whipped her hair into a tangled mess, but she didn't care. Every second counted. The Telfair Museum's classical facade was illuminated with elegant spotlights, and a red carpet extended from the main entrance to the street, where limousines and luxury cars disgorged Savannah's elite in evening wear. Emily directed the courier to the service entrance in the back alley. "Wait for me," she pleaded, pressing half the money into his hand. "The rest when I come back out." The service entrance was a flurry of activity. Catering staff in black and white uniforms rushing in and out with trays of hors d'oeuvres and champagne flutes. Emily slipped inside, searching for Lucille among the harried workers. She found her supervising a dessert station, a middle-aged woman with Earl's same kind eyes, currently focused on arranging delicate chocolate sculptures. "Lucille, Earl sent me. I need to reach Judge Morrison urgently." Lucille glanced up, taking in Emily's wind-blown appearance and desperate expression. You look like you've been through hell, honey. A woman's life depends on me finding the judge tonight. Something in Emily's tone must have conveyed her sincerity, because Lucille's professional demeanor softened. Judge Morrison is by the West exhibit. Tall man with a white beard and red bow tie. You didn't hear it from me. Emily slipped through the kitchen and into the main gallery, suddenly acutely aware of her jeans and rumpled blouse amid a sea of evening gowns and tuxedos. Chandeliers sparkled above priceless artwork and Savannah's most influential citizens, all sipping champagne and making small talk that had nothing to do with life or death. She spotted Judge Morrison across the room, exactly as Lucille had described, distinguished and imposing, currently engaged in conversation with an elderly couple. As Emily made her way toward him, a hand gripped her arm from behind, spinning her around. "You're becoming quite the problem, Nurse Carter." Clive Donovan stood before her in an impeccable tuxedo, looking every inch the respected community leader. Up close, she could see the surgical precision of a facelift around his temples, part of his transformation into whoever he was pretending to be now. "Let go of me," Emily hissed, trying to pull away without causing a scene. His fingers dug deeper. "Walk out with me now, or I'll have security throw you out, your choice." "I know you didn't die in that fire," Emily said, her voice low but steady. "I know you framed Rosa to cover up what really happened. I have Roberto's letters, Callahan's evidence, Father Thomas's testimony." A flicker of genuine fear crossed Donovan's face before his mask of control returned. "Quite an imagination you have, but none of that will matter after tomorrow morning, will it?" "It will all matter," Emily countered. "Whether Rosa lives or dies, the truth is coming out. You can't silence everyone." "I've managed for 20 years, he replied with chilling confidence. "Now, you have 5 seconds to walk out of here quietly, or I'll—" "Is there a problem here?" A deep, authoritative voice interrupted them. Judge Morrison had approached, his bushy white eyebrows drawn together in concern. Donovan immediately released Emily's arm, his demeanor transforming. "No problem at all, Your Honor. This young lady seems to have confused me with someone else." "Actually, Your Honor," Emily said quickly, "I came here specifically to find you. I have urgent evidence requiring an emergency stay of execution in the Rosa Alvarado case." The judge's expression shifted to one of professional interest. "The Alvarado case? That's scheduled for tomorrow morning." "Yes, sir. I have evidence proving her innocence that was suppressed during the original investigation." Emily held up her bag, including testimony that this man, who calls himself Clive Donovan, faked his own death in that fire and framed Rosa Alvarado. Judge Morrison's gaze moved between Emily and Donovan, who maintained an expression of bemused indignation. "This is absurd, Your Honor. I've never met this woman before tonight. Clearly she's disturbed." "I have Detective Callahan's original case notes," Emily continued desperately, "and letters from Roberto Alvarado proving he was alive after the fire, contrary to what the prosecution claimed. Morrison's legal training was evident in his measured response. These are serious allegations. Both of you come with me." He led them to a private office in the museum's administrative section, where Emily laid out the evidence piece by piece. The photos showing multiple fire origins, the candle tin with the fire department logo, Roberto's letters, Callahan's notes about the homeless veteran's body being misidentified. Throughout her presentation, Donovan maintained a facade of offended dignity, but when Emily mentioned the cassette tape of Rosa's original interview, something changed in his expression. "That tape was destroyed," he said automatically, then caught himself. At least it would have been standard procedure to include all recordings in the case file. Judge Morrison fixed him with a penetrating stare. "How would you know that, Mr. Donovan, if you weren't involved in the case?" Donovan realized his mistake too late. His hand moved suddenly toward his jacket pocket, but Morrison was faster than his age suggested. The judge grabbed Donovan's wrist, revealing a small pistol. "Security!" Morrison bellowed, his voice carrying with decades of courtroom authority. 2 museum security guards burst in, quickly disarming and restraining Donovan, whose composed mask had finally shattered. "You can't prove anything," he snarled at Emily. "It's my word against a convicted murderer's, and against a Catholic priest's and a dead detective's evidence, and physical proof of arson staging," Emily countered. "DNA testing on Roberto's letters will prove he was alive after the fire. Modern forensic techniques can confirm the fire origins weren't as described in the altered reports." Judge Morrison was already on the phone. This is Judge William Morrison. I need to issue an emergency stay of execution for Rosa Alvarado, scheduled for tomorrow morning at Georgia State Penitentiary. He listened for a moment. Yes, immediately. New exculpatory evidence has been presented. As he hung up, he turned to Emily. The stay has been granted pending review of this evidence. Ms. Alvarado's execution is postponed indefinitely. Emily's legs nearly gave out with relief. Rosa would live to see another day, and hopefully, many more. But her job wasn't done yet. She still had to get to the prison to tell Rosa herself that her 20 years of silence hadn't been in vain. And there was someone else who needed to know the truth too. Someone who had been waiting just as long. I need to get to the animal shelter, Emily told the judge as the police arrived to take Donovan away. There's a dog who's the last living witness to what really happened that night. Dawn broke over Georgia State Penitentiary in a palette of pinks and golds that seemed cruelly beautiful against the stark concrete walls. Emily sat in her car in the staff parking lot, exhaustion etched into every line of her face. She hadn't slept in over 48 hours, running on nothing but adrenaline and the fierce determination to set things right. The Savannah Municipal Animal Shelter had been closed by the time she'd left the museum the previous night, but Judge Morrison had arranged for a police escort to meet her there at first light. Now in the passenger seat beside her, an elderly golden retriever mix sat with surprising dignity, his cloudy eyes somehow conveying a wisdom born of patient suffering. Lucky was much older than Emily had imagined, his muzzle almost completely white, his movements stiff with arthritis. But when the shelter worker had opened his kennel and whispered Rosa's name, the old dog had immediately stood at attention, his tail wagging with sudden vigor. He's been waiting for her for 20 years, the worker had explained, wiping away a tear. Most dogs his age get overlooked, but we could never bring ourselves to, well, you know, something about him just felt special, like he was waiting for someone. Now Lucky watched the prison entrance with an alertness that belied his advanced age, as if he somehow understood exactly where they were and why. Emily's phone rang. Officer Parker's number. They're saying the execution's been postponed, he said without preamble, his voice tight with controlled hope. That true? Yes. Judge Morrison issued an emergency stay last night, and Donovan's been arrested. His real identity is being confirmed now. Parker's exhale was audible. Thank God. And Rosa? Have you told her? I'm at the prison now, Emily replied. With Lucky. That old dog still alive? Parker sounded genuinely surprised. Must be waiting for Rosa. Some animals just know, you know. Emily glanced at Lucky, who had perked up his ears at the mention of Rosa's name. Yeah, I think they do. Listen, Parker's voice lowered. Word is they've located Roberto. He's been living under the name Manuel Diaz in Tucson, working as a high school teacher. Never married, no kids. Just waiting, I guess. Like the dog. Emily's heart clenched. Is he coming? FBI's bringing him in now. Should arrive by noon. After ending the call, Emily gathered her courage and led Lucky through the staff entrance. The morning shift was just beginning, officers and medical personnel nodding to her with varying degrees of curiosity as she walked the old dog slowly through the corridors. Lucky moved with surprising purpose, his nails clicking on the linoleum floors, his nose occasionally testing the air as if searching for a scent remembered from long ago. Director Walters met them at the entrance to Death Row, his face a mask of professional neutrality. Nurse Carter, I understand from Judge Morrison that you were instrumental in uncovering new evidence in the Alvarado case. Yes, sir. Emily kept her tone equally professional, though her heart was racing. I'd like to inform Rosa of the stay personally, if that's permitted. Walters hesitated, then nodded. Given the circumstances, I'll allow it, but I'll need to accompany you with the dog. Regulations. As they walked the final corridor to Rosa's cell, Lucky began to tremble with what Emily realized was anticipation rather than fear. His tail wagged with increasing energy, his nose working overtime, small whines escaping his throat. Rosa sat on her bunk just as she had when Emily first saw her, small, dignified, resigned to her fate. She wore the standard white outfit designated for executions, her silver hair neatly combed, her gnarled hands folded in her lap. She looked up as the cell door opened, her expression unchanging until she saw who accompanied the director and Emily. Lucky? She whispered, her voice breaking on the name. The old dog let out a soft woof of recognition and pulled forward with such sudden strength that Emily had to release the leash. Lucky moved across the cell with the fluid grace of a much younger animal, his entire body quivering with joy as he reached Rosa. Rosa slid from the bunk to her knees on the floor, wrapping her arms around Lucky's neck as the dog covered her face with gentle licks, whining softly as if trying to speak to her. 20 years of separation vanished in an instant of pure, unconditional love that brought tears to Emily's eyes. "How?" Rosa asked, looking up at Emily with wondering gratitude, one hand still buried in Lucky's fur, as if afraid he might disappear. "Your execution has been stayed, Mrs. Alvarado," Emily explained gently, kneeling beside them. "We found evidence. Detective Callahan's notes, Father Thomas's testimony, the letters from Roberto. At her son's name, Rosa's eyes widened in fear. "Roberto? No, you cannot say his name. He is in danger if—" "Clive Donovan has been arrested," Director Walters interjected, his voice softer than Emily had ever heard it. "The real Clive Donovan. He's alive, Mrs. Alvarado. The body found with your husband was a homeless veteran." Rosa's hands flew to her mouth. "Dios mío," she whispered. "All these years, I thought Roberto would be safe only if I stayed silent." "Your son is alive, Rosa," Emily said gently, taking the older woman's weathered hand. "He's been living in Arizona under a different name. The FBI is bringing him here today." Rosa began to sob, deep, heaving cries that seemed to release 2 decades of pent-up fear, grief, and longing. Lucky pressed closer to her, offering the simple comfort of his presence. The dog that had witnessed the truth 20 years ago had lived long enough to see justice finally approach. When Rosa's tears subsided, she looked at Emily with clear eyes that now held something they hadn't before: hope. "How did you know?" she asked. "How did you discover the truth when no one else would listen?" Emily smiled softly. "It started with Lucky. Your request to see him. It made me wonder why, after 20 years of silence, your only wish was to see your dog. Not for a special meal, not for religious comfort. Just Lucky. And then I saw something in your eyes that didn't match your confession. The absence of guilt." Rosa nodded slowly. "I am guilty of many things. Of not protecting my son sooner from his father. Of staying silent when I should have spoken, but I did not kill Miguel or set that fire." She stroked Lucky's ears gently. "Lucky knew. He was there when Roberto defended me, when Miguel fell. He barked and barked when Donovan came, as if trying to warn us." Director Walters cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the raw emotion filling the small cell. "I need to process the paperwork for your transfer back to general population, Mrs. Alvarado, and there will be meetings with your new legal team to formally clear your name." After he left, Emily sat beside Rosa on the narrow bunk, Lucky resting his head on Rosa's lap, his brown eyes never leaving her face. "Why did you agree to confess?" Emily asked gently. "You sacrificed everything for Roberto." Rosa's smile was sad but resolute. "When you become a mother, you understand there is nothing you would not do to protect your child. Roberto was brilliant. Scholarship to university first in our family. That night Miguel was drunk, more violent than ever before. When Roberto tried to protect me," her voice faltered, "Donovan told me Roberto would be found guilty of murder, that no one would believe it was self-defense, that he would go to prison for life or worse. But if I confessed to setting the fire, Roberto could escape, start a new life." "And you never told anyone the truth? Not even your lawyers?" Rosa shook her head. "Donovan said he had friends everywhere. Police, courts, prison. If I spoke, Roberto would be found and killed. I believed him." She looked down at Lucky, a tear falling onto his fur. "Lucky was the only other witness I knew he would remember, even if no one else did." Emily felt a lump in her throat. He remembered. And now Roberto is coming home to you. As Rosa wept again, this time with joy, Lucky licked away her tears with the same devotion he had shown 20 years ago. Outside the cell, the sun continued its ascent, illuminating the prison yard where, in a few hours, a mother and son would embrace for the first time in 2 decades. A reunion made possible by one woman's determination to understand why a condemned prisoner's only last wish had been to see her faithful dog. Rosa's story reminds us that some silences don't hide guilt. They hide fear. In a world that often rushes to judgment, how many others might be suffering in silence, carrying burdens that aren't theirs to bear? It took the devotion of a dog who remembered, and the courage of a woman who questioned what everyone else accepted as truth to finally break 20 years of injustice. What would you do if faced with Rosa's impossible choice? Sacrifice your freedom to protect someone you love, or speak a truth that might destroy them? And if you were Emily, would you have the courage to challenge an established narrative, risking your career and even your life for a stranger? Sometimes the greatest acts of heroism aren't grand gestures but small moments of defiance against convenient lies. As Lucky's unwavering loyalty shows us, the truth never truly dies. It waits patiently to be discovered by those willing to listen to the silent witnesses among us. If this story moved you, please follow our channel for more powerful tales that challenge our understanding of justice, sacrifice, and redemption. Share with someone who appreciates stories that linger in the heart long after they end, and comment below with your thoughts on what Rosa's journey teaches us about the power of a mother's love.